Meeting's called to order.
Boom.
Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Parker. Please remain standing for a moment of prayer, silence, and meditation following the salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to start this off with a review of public comments. And this is an opportunity reserved for members of the public to address the board on matters not on this agenda. No action may be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anybody wishing to take advantage of public comments? Please move to the podium and have your way with it.
Hi, my name is Sophia Merck, and I'm speaking for myself. I would like to submit some documentation that I received at the Public Lands Roundtable a couple weeks ago. It's in regards to the water that's being released from LADWP, and I would like to give it to the clerk.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Gleason and Board.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Don Decker. I'm representing this morning the Administrative Committee of the Domestic Well Owners. We have a letter which I would like to read to the record. It may be a little more than 3 minutes, but it's not very long. This letter is a plea to the GA Board for an equitable representation on the PAC for the domestic well owners and the rural citizens of the Indian Wells Valley. The domestic well owners have only 2 positions on the PAC, but more positions for other groups are being proposed, including 2 new positions for IWV Water District rate-paying customers who are already being represented by the Water District, the city, and the county. This is a very unbalanced allocation. This situation is compounded when the domestic well owner's typical tenuous water supply is taken into consideration. Our typical shallower wells make us the coal mine canaries. Many of our private domestic well owners are already having major troubles. DWOA AC members, the Administrative Committee members, have put a huge amount of effort into trying to provide accurate and fair representation for the IWV domestic well owners. Our full task has really been to provide representation for the entire rural community. We took this on because it was obvious, everyone realized that the rural community was just silent and quiet and in their own way suffering. Recently, the issue of representation for disadvantaged communities has been brought up by Mr. Page from San Bernardino County. He was likely referring to San Bernardino County citizens, but Kern and Inyo County disadvantaged rural communities deserve recognition also. We submit that an additional PAC seat would be an appropriate recognition of the important task of representing the rural community that we have already assumed. One of our core domestic well owner AC members has for years been providing a free tax preparation service for disadvantaged and senior citizens. VITA is the acronym. Some of you may be aware of that service. Other members of our AC have long been engaged with disadvantaged IWV citizens, many of them on North Brown Road. And we're doing this even as Mr. Page was recommending suitable action. The domestic well owners bylaws from the very beginning has specifically included the domestic well owners who are members of one of the many co-ops or mutuals in the Valley. Most of these co-op groups have been regularly receiving our update package. GA board member Peggy Breeden has repeatedly offered the observation that there should be an additional seat for a co-op or mutual well owner. She apparently has not been aware that the domestic well owners has long stepped up to represent this very group. We respectfully request another PAC seat for this function. We are fully prepared and ready to accept such a seat. We have now described 2 additional PAC seats in addition to the original 2 that were assigned to the domestic well owners. We're requesting a total of 4 seats. This is not a casual request, and the Domestic Well Owners Administration has recently offered 4 extremely well qualified applicants for these seats. The individuals involved have decades of water supply experience and have outstanding credentials for the intended positions. The time and energy these individuals have spent has been offered entirely in the spirit of benefit for the entire IWV community. We represent the well owners, but everything we've done has been in a direction that benefits everyone. We maintain our steadfast commitment to the support of the GA Board and its critical mission of securing the future Valley water supply. As we always have, we encourage the GA Board to act responsibly and in the best public interest and with a sense of urgency. Thank you, Chairman Gleason, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Can you leave? Are you willing to leave that letter with us?
I am.
Please do.
I have copies for you all. And,
great. Yes, sir.
Joshua Nugent on behalf of both Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Farms. Just real quick, wanted to say thank you for the meeting that we had the other night. I thought it was a good format. Especially want to thank Dale for putting up with all of us so late. And I think that's a good model for moving forward. And I've looked at some of the revisions. It looks like no one got everything they wanted, but everyone got a little bit of what they wanted. And that's how I think group efforts are supposed to work. So I just wanted to say thank you. And hopefully we can, when big things come up in the future, we can kind of vet them through public processes like that. So thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other takers? Seeing none, we'll close public presentations, comments, and move to special presentations. We have none. Bring us to the consent agenda. Items may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion by the board. Does anybody remember the consent agenda listed is A, approve the minutes of board meeting and workshop of April 26th, 2017. Anybody in the public wishing to make comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll bring it to the board for comment consideration.
I'll make the motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please signal your vote by saying if you're in favor, say aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, say no. Okay. Moves on to item number 6, approve Article 5 of the IWVGA bylaws. Ms. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Groundwater Authority. What we've given you and provided in the packet is a red line strikeout version of Article 5 of the bylaws. It is intended to incorporate much of the comments from the public and direction from the board at the workshop on April 26th. I am going to turn the time over to our counsel, Phil Hall, to go through the changes. There's another version that you have on your desk that had a couple of clerical changes. I'm going to let him go through that with you right now, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is that one different than what's in our?
It is.
On our desk here.
Yes, what you have on your desk that we gave you is slightly different, and Mr. Hall will go through that.
I'll explain what those are. So to set the backdrop, what we did here, because there's so many people commenting on it, we tried to put one clean version, and then we ran a comparison with the clean version to what we had set out at the workshop. And then that was the red line that was supposed to come out of this. Somewhere in that process, 3 things that we changed didn't get picked up in the comparison document by word, and they've been pointed out, and I'll tell you what those are now. So if you go on 5.6, which is on the second page, assist needs an extra S in it, so there's a typo there for spelling. The next one is in 5.10. And it's down here. If you go through, you'll see some numbering in 5.10. Number 5 should say, pursue the PAC's purpose and goals and support GSP development and where legally appropriate implementation. And we've put legally appropriate in there because some issues of implementation will be quasi-judicial in nature. And as such, it's really, some people call it enforcement. Those need to be done by the board itself and not a PAC. So that's just to signify that. And then on 511, for some reason, this last sentence in there, which is the water resource manager shall act as the chair, that's what it starts with, that sentence is removed. We now have a PAC structure or a tax structure in this where the water resource manager is going to set the agenda and will act as really a sort of a observing staff member of the TAC. They won't vote. We've been asked to add attend to the portion of this document where we say he's setting the agenda. I don't know if it's really needed, but if the board was willing to and wanting to, we could add on 513, the water resource manager shall set the agenda of each, shall set the agenda and attend each TAC meeting. So it was already contemplated that he would be attending the TAC meeting. That's the reason why the TAC exists, is to assist him in his work. But for clarification purposes, we've been requested to do that. And those are the changes. And then if you're willing to and wanting to adopt them today, we have a resolution that we can read into the record to finally adopt them.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Ms. Christensen, you done?
I am.
Before we go to the public, is there any board members who wish to make comment?
I have a question. Can only the manager set the agenda? It is not in conjunction with anyone else?
For the TAC?
For the TAC.
The TAC is set up so
the TAC chair?
No. The water resource manager will be setting the agenda because he's going to be the one bringing the issues as he's working through them in the GSP to the TAC for comment.
With input from the TAC, can he, if somebody from the TAC wants to put ABC on, and how do they get ABC on?
Well, we're starting to get really hypothetical. So
yeah, it is.
You got to remember the water resource manager is drafting the GSP, and they're going through the science it needs for it. And as they're working on each chapter and each portion of that, they're going to bring that to the TAC to get comment real time on that section. If there's something that some member of the TAC thinks that he should be looking at that he's refusing to look at, they can come to your board and ask your board to be put on.
I'm not asking for if it's refused, just as a matter of course. Does the TAC have input to put items on their agenda?
No, because they're not going to know what section of the GSP he's working on at that point. So it would be premature or whatever. The idea here is he's really working on the GSP. They're commenting on his portions, so he needs that real-time input, and therefore he's setting the agenda.
Mr. Brown.
I was reading over this, and then I was reminded that the Kern County Water Agency has reserved resources. They were on the previous TAC from the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group. And so they stopped attending that because they only had enough funding to come to the town once a month. So I just wanted to make sure, I'm thinking maybe it fits in 5.12, but I just want to make sure that the language will accept them to be a part of the TAC, since they've been recording all of our well data forever, and then they report on it, and they're also a database for us to use. So, is that in there? Or?
I'm not sure that, Mr. Chair, through the chair. I think I was alerted to that concern yesterday. I don't, because it's a public meeting and anybody is available to come to the meeting. I think the water agency would be welcome. We had never contemplated additional involvement other than what they're doing now, because the water agency had indicated they had a limit. They weren't going to be involved in the GSA. So I think we can put some language in if you want to, but as far as I'm concerned, they are more than welcome. Anybody who has data to provide the TAC would be obviously welcome at those meetings to provide that information. So,
Well, I was actually looking more as a member of the TAC. Because,
as a member? Because
the way the TAC is currently structured, they've always been a member of the TAC for the cooperative. I don't know why it escaped me, but they want to attend an a TAC function, and they don't want to be on this board or a PAC, but they do want to be in the TAC. So however that works out, or we can work it in, it's all still unfolding.
Ms. Brown, are you suggesting we list and articulate clearly a membership role for the water district in the bylaws?
You mean the Kern County Water Agency?
Yeah.
If it's necessary. If it's not, I don't care.
At this stage, I don't think it's necessary in these, and let me show you why. If you go down to what's really the last sentence on the page before 512 turns over to the next, you'll notice that the board may also appoint members to the TAC that aren't affiliated with anybody on the PAC. So you can appoint the water agency on the TAC if you'd like to already.
Just wanted to make sure. I knew you would answer the question, Phil. I knew it, but I just had to ask. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
I'm in reading the section on the quorum. It looks like that to have a meeting, you have to have a quorum, which in this case now I think there's 11 members, so there'd be 6. And then it says that you can pass something with a majority of the members present, which would be down to 4. And is that really the number of people that everybody agrees would be the right number of people to pass things from the PAC? So you don't really be able to pass stuff with only 4 people present, 4 people voting for something.
Thanks, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Hall?
This is really a policy choice, and you can do it either way you wish. I can tell you, just to give you some background, the way cities are set up, a majority of the quorum present. So if you have 5 city council members, 3 show up, you get a quorum, 2 can pass a vote and take action. Most water districts, it takes a majority of the board. So it means you always have to have, if 3 show up and it's a 5-member board, 3 vote. This is really policy choice. Sometimes games could be played by not showing up to vote on stuff and manipulating it by not showing up for a vote you don't like. But it's policy. It could go either way.
Thanks, Mr. Hall. I know we have another comment from Mr. Lemieux.
Yeah. Again, this is a policy decision, but also bear in mind that what the PAC is doing is primarily providing advice. They're not passing ordinances and resolutions. So their value is to get you advice. And so part of the reason for this thinking was that we wanted to make sure that that there was no impediments to getting you answers, particularly since it's really just advisory anyway. Of course, if it turns out that in your example, you have 4 people that don't really reflect the will of the majority, then that will affect the weight that the board puts to that advice. So I think it's corrected in that sense.
Say that last part one more time.
In other words, if for some reason it comes out that there's an odd majority, a minority that passes something because of circumstance, and the rest of the board is unhappy with that, or the rest of the committee is unhappy with that, then that will be weighted by the board when they're taking that piece of advice into consideration.
I understand. And I recognize that I haven't been here for all of these discussions, and maybe this has been fleshed out, but it did seem like that it's possible for a pretty small number of people to pass on a recommendation to the board. And I think that's a good point, is that you could really look at who is in attendance. But it also, this setup does encourage people to attend.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Kingley. I think we have some comments down this end. Mr. Page.
I think that those are valid points to make regarding the voting on things. I think we did address this as well in the JPA agreement document in terms of the voting structure we set up specifically for adoption of the GSP. And that addressed not only council's point regarding people not showing up, but we still maintained a supermajority vote on the GSP, even if only 3 of us showed up. And so I thought that worked well. And I don't know if that would be a compromise of going either to the 2 options that our council presented, which were either a majority of those present or a majority of the PAC itself. That compromise we reached on the adoption of the GSP was that if the number of people showing up came down, there was still a supermajority vote. And maybe that gets us to a middle ground between that question. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, and I don't have the document in front of me. I apologize. I've been on vacation the last week, so I don't have all my notes. But as I recall, the agreement indicates that for adoption of the GSP, if all 5 of us here, we need 4 votes to approve it. If only 4 of us, we need 3 votes, and so on. So I would suggest, since really the PAC's main function is going to be working and developing and recommending a GSP to us, is that maybe we consider some sort of compromise resolution similar to what we did with the JPA agreement.
Thanks, sir. Any other comments? Well, now we're going to hear what the public thinks about the entirety of this agenda item. So if you'd like to make comment, please come on down.
My name is Sophia Merck. I'm speaking for myself. I submitted a letter the day after the workshop, and I didn't know if it actually got to the rest of the board, but I would like to resubmit the letter now.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Del Haletic. I'm a domestic well owner and live near North Brown Road. Before you approve the bylaws, I would hope that you consider the number of representatives from the Domestic Well Owner Association. And also, I have a question, might not be appropriate right now, but before you do approve the bylaws, I wondered why you did not select domestic well owners for the PAC committee, which is part of 5.7, which designates where the representatives are from, which category, and how many. So before you vote on the bylaws for Article 5, I wish you would consider what kind of representation we do have. Remember, domestic well owners and actually the rural community in whole only have Mick supporting us. That's it, 1. We only have 1 of the 5. So our representation to start with is not the same as other factions of this community. So that's why we're so concerned about the I guess it's called the overall representative of the PAC committee. We want to make sure that you hear us and you hear the rural community, which is not well represented. So please consider that before you vote. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Raymond Kelso, and I'm a member of the public. And the last meeting that we had in April 26th, I asked a question, and my question was, who represents me? And I'm a member of the public. And I didn't get a good answer. In fact, I was basically ignored, and I'll get to that in a minute. This simple question has far-reaching consequences to all residents in Indian Wells Valley. And according to the Indian Wells Valley Water District homepage, quote, Indian Wells Valley in the Mojave Desert and has one source of fresh water that needs to be preserved for future generations, unquote. For the sake of our grandchildren, we must ensure that our aquifer doesn't continue to be devastated by for-profit businesses that use thousands of acre-feet of our water for free. The stakes are high as we watch control of our water slide further away from a democracy and closer to a corporate oligarchy. On April 26th, the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority appointed representatives from Meadowbrook Farms and Mojave Pistachios to the Indian Wells Valley Ground Authority Policy Advisory Committee, the PAC. This event assures that the two largest agricultural companies in the Indian Wells Valley and major pumpers in our critical overdraft Indian Wells Valley are two family-owned businesses represented by lawyers on the PAC. They have interests that are diametrically opposed to those of the 30,000 plus people that live in Indian Wells Valley. Let me quote this. As noted in the Indian Wells GA bylaws, they require the PAC to, number one, and I quote, provide all water users in the basin with a meaningful voice and representation. The list as it is obviously overrepresents agricultural interests. None of these constituent groups, as listed, represent me, the 12,000 customers of the Indian Wells Valley Water District, or the vast majority of the 30,000 plus residents in Indian Wells Valley. And I ask you, what is the justification for this lopsided representation? In response to my concern at the April 26 meeting in regards to who represents me, I was told that we, the public, have more direct representation because our county supervisor, the Indian Wells Valley Water District, and the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District are the IWVGA, which are IWV board members, and I disagree, and here's why. Each of those members have to report to higher level boards. They may or may not have my or the public's best interest as a priority. They must also represent citizens with incompatible interests. And I agree with Mr. Phil Hall's statement that, quote, you can't have self-interested individuals having undue influence or control over the science, and that must also apply to the PAC. As a result of the public comments on April 26 meeting, the IWVGA is considering adding two more representatives to the PAC, one a standard resident user and one from the underserved community. But even with these additions, as currently proposed, the PAC will have 9 members representing self-interest that conflict with the 2 representing the public. In a democracy, shouldn't the majority of the people have the majority of the say rather than those few who use the most water for profit? These are serious times, and we need serious action by people that operate out of principle rather than greedy self-interest. The IWVGA board, the PAC, the Technical Advisory Committee must all have fundamental and transparent accountability. The lopsided membership on the PAC does not pass the smell test. And the IWVGA board is failing the public trust. It is self-evident that any relationship with the agricultural community will not be harmonious. But our precious resource must be sustainably managed and protected for generations to come. I am a firm believer that structure dictates behavior. The structure of the PAC and the TAC must be such that the people have a voice. I urge the IWVGA and the Indian Wells Valley Water District to revisit and revise the PAC and the TAC membership categories to ensure fair, equitable, and balanced input so all citizens have a meaningful voice and representation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Renee Westelusk. I live within Ridgecrest city limits. I have a concern. I agree with Mr. Kingsley. I'm concerned about the quorum. I'm worried, how will the board know how many people showed up at the PAC committee? Are you going to be given attendance records? Are you going to be given who out of that group showed up? I guess on a regular basis. I'm worried about having too few people make some decisions. So I would like a larger, as large as you can make, a quorum. And then I have a question regarding, I guess I'm confused by the comments regarding the domestic well owners. I assume they want more representatives. I'm on the PAC committee. I guess they want more than 2, and do they want a slot for one of the organizations that exists for domestic well owners? I guess I don't understand their request. And then the other thing I support is I do support you putting 2 representatives from residential customers of a public water supplier on there, because I agree with Mr. Kelso. While you have non-voting members on there, like the Indian Wells Valley Water District, that represents everybody that lives within Ridgecrest city limits and gets water from the water district, they're not voting. They can't vote on the policy advisory committee. And I think we need voting members that represent within Ridgecrest city limits that get their water from the water district, because the population of Ridgecrest, from my calculations from the last 2010 census, is the population within Ridgecrest city limits is at least 75% of the population of this valley. And I think 75% of the population of this valley deserves a vote on the policy advisory committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Stan Rotora. The group that I was working with in terms of providing inputs to the bylaws recommended that the committee chairs be appointed by the committees, and that did happen. And I am very appreciative of that, as well as everybody that I work with. However, there are 2 lingering issues that we had put forward previously that were not addressed that I would like to go over real briefly. One of those is that the board can unilaterally remove committee members without any type of communications with the committees itself. I brought this up at the workshop, and I think the public was pretty much unanimously agreement and in consensus that that should be changed. Now, there's a lot of ways that could be changed to allow the committee to have an input, and I don't want to debate that here now because we couldn't possibly get through all that in the time we have. But I still feel, as well as the group that I work with, that we need to have something other than just this board responsible for removing people. I could say the public at the workshop, I think, was pretty much in consensus that that is the way things should be. I think you can think of lots and lots of reasons why the board should be totally in control. Sure, okay, that's really not the issue. My feeling is that what the public really feels should happen is what you all should be working toward making happen. I spoke briefly with Mr. Lemieux yesterday He was concerned. I don't want to put words in his mouth, and he said a lot of different things regarding it. But one of the things he said was, we want to make sure there's no rogue committee member that wants to take over the committee, and we have to get rid of this person. My feeling is maybe he's been watching too much TV. Typically, that doesn't happen. My feeling is that I want people to be able to speak their minds. When they're either in the public or on the committee, they have to be able to speak their minds freely and openly without any threat or intimidation of being removed. And that's very important if we're going to get all of the issues out and before the people. So I would still like to see, I'm not going to suggest words, but there's a lot of different ways it could be handled. Okay. The other issue is basically one of nothing more than transparency. Transparency requires public meetings. We had suggested that there would be some minimum number of meetings for both the PAC and the TAC. The public has been told that our input into this board is going to be through the PAC and through the TAC. That can only happen if the PAC and the TAC meet, and I suggested a minimum of meeting once a month. Now, don't care when it is, but in order to have input, those groups have to meet. We suggested that in our red line document, and that was not picked up. Again, there's numerous ways of dealing with that. Simplest thing is the TAC and the PAC have to meet at a minimum of once a month. Keep it simple. It doesn't have to be complex, but the public has the right to provide input, and that is what actually gives us the transparency that the Signal Law requires.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Judy Decker. I would like to clarify some things for Mr. Kelso and others, and I'm probably taking words out of your mouth, but people seem to have forgotten that, as you said earlier, the PAC and the TAC are advisory committee only. That the decisions that will be made regarding our future water supply are going to be made by you 5 people. And certainly the customers that live within the boundaries of the city and the water district have 3 representatives, where some people who live in the county who are private well owners have 1 representative, Mr. Gleason, who has to represent all of us. As we speak about details, the water levels continue to drop. The water quality continues to deteriorate. We need to move forward, and we need to move forward based on science and based on what is best for this valley. Every single person who lives here is going to be giving up the use of water. There's no doubt about it. If you're using at least 6 times more water than nature is returning, that's a big problem. If it was your checkbook, you'd be hearing from the bank instantly. I hope that the people in the audience, and of course you people up here who have to make the really hard decisions in the future, keep all these things in mind. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Next up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Members of the board. I'm Derek Hoffman of Gresham Savage, legal counsel for Meadowbrook. First, we want to say thank you to the board and to staff and Ms. Schaefer for the workshop of last month. We appreciate the time and the energy and really the thought that's gone into the process of crafting Article 5. And we know, as you know, that these issues about committees is very important to the public. And so we do express appreciation for your effort in this regard. Regarding the proposed changes in today's draft, I just have one policy item to mention and discuss briefly, and then two minor but I think important wording clarifications that I think are what the board intends but would actually help align the intent with the language. And since this is a legal document, I hope you'll bear with me as I point those out. I'll try to be very focused and brief. The first, the policy issue, had to do with the Water Resources Manager's role and its integration with the TAC. And back in April, the version that was presented to the board for Article 5 had the Water Resources Manager as the chair of the TAC. And today what we see is that that's been removed. And so there's a question mark, which is, well, how does the Water Resource Manager integrate with the TAC? And as we've said many times, we believe that it's important that there be a close integration and collaboration with the Water Resources Manager and the committees, and especially with the TAC. And so I believe Mr. Hall suggested today adding a clarification in 5.13 to make it clear that the Water Resource Manager will attend every TAC meeting. And we think that that may be an appropriate solution. If the Water Resource Manager is not going to be the chair of the TAC, or if they're not going to be a member of the TAC, then at least they ought to attend every meeting and be there to make sure that we have that type of collaboration. So we'd support that additional change that Mr. Hall recommended today and ask that you do make that change. The second having to do with this, and this comes from some of the discussion I heard earlier this morning about the Water Resource Manager setting the agenda. That may be appropriate to make sure that it's organized, but to Mayor Breeden's comment, there ought to be some input from the TAC on the agenda. If the Water Resource Manager ultimately sets the agenda, there ought to at least be some input from the TAC, whether it be through the TAC chair or the vice chair or otherwise. And we'd ask that you include that as well. That can be done to section 5.13 with input from the TAC on setting the agenda. Okay, and then two minor but I think important wording revisions. These have to do with section 5.7. And again, I hope you'll just bear with me briefly. New language was added today about individuals seeking appointment to the policy committee. And I'm concerned that the language that says, the new language that says, or a person that relies on groundwater from the basin, that might be inadvertently overbroad. Technically someone, again, I know this is extreme, but technically someone who drinks from a water fountain while visiting for a day relies on groundwater from the basin. And so I would offer a minor but I think important clarification to say a person that regularly relies on groundwater from the basin for their primary water supply. I think that's the type of person that you're thinking of, a person that regularly relies on groundwater from the basin for their primary water supply. It's someone who has a vested presence in this basin, not someone who has very little to do, if anything, to do with the basin. And then finally, also under section 5.7, there's been a proposal to add 2 representatives from residential customers of a public agency water suppliers, strike the S on suppliers. And I would also add to that that it be a public agency water supplier that produces and serves water within the basin. Again, just a clarification of who we're talking about here. Public water agency supplier that produces and serves water within the basin. So thank you for reviewing that with me today. Again, I just want to express the importance of making sure that that collaboration exists between the Water Resource Manager and the TAC. And also thank you again for the very diligent focus and attention you've given to this process in crafting Article 5. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up.
Donna Thomas, member of the public. I just want to make a suggestion that as a representative for the disadvantaged communities, there might be an outreach made to the Inyokern Community Services District, which would represent a disadvantaged area. The other is just a minor comment about grammatical correction. It's just above section 5.10. At the top of the page, the third sentence, with a detailed reasoning to support of its determination. Either reasoning in support of or
to support its determination. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Wes Katzenstein, a domestic well owner and member of the Domestic Well Owners Association. And I feel a tad bit uncomfortable about the dialogue about the Kern Water Agency not being a member of the TAC. It occurs to me as we move forward and as we evaluate our progress on stabilizing the groundwater, the two key things that are going to be playing against each other as a measure of progress are going to be the models and the measured well data. The measured well data is a huge hard point in our assessment of what's going on. And it seems to me that based on the role that Kern Water Agency plays in providing us in that measured water data, the well levels, that they should be, I would think, have full membership in the TAC. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Harold Manis, and I'm a private well owner, and I have a question for you people on this, because I'm seeing things that I've seen for the past 30 years where you're not really appearing to take the problem into account. Where are the agricultural people going to be held as accountable as you seem to be holding the private well owners in Indian Wells Valley Water District? You see, it seems like you're saying that we're more susceptible to being cut back than the agriculture. And the agriculture, this is not an agricultural area. And we've seen from what they've done as it's come north from Los Angeles to here, like what's gone on down at Garlock. You drive through there now and it looks like a bad picture of Death Valley. And are you going to have, well, let me back up, I'm sorry. After the workshop and thinking about some of the comments that were made, and you in talking to yourself and talking about your own limitations and what you could do, I'm asking will this committee and this council and everything have the ability to limit the water or reduce the water that is available to the agriculture? I mean, is it going to be more for the people to reach the point where they are dying of thirst in the valley, or the arsenic has condemned the water from use without being recirculated, so to speak, while the agriculture makes the money, and if they run out of water or it gets bad, they leave, like they did there at Garlock, or like they've done all over. This is not Palm Springs area. We don't have water coming down off the mountain where we can see it or go, get and take pictures of it. And so I'm asking, does this council are you going to have or are you just making recommendations to go on to the higher ups, as has happened over the past 30 or 40 years in Indian Wells Valley, when it was started out that Indian Wells Valley was trying to get their water district going, and the private well owners, it was the Indian Wells Valley and the water district. Now it's the well owners, the people drinking the water and who are dependent on the water for survival, versus those who are using it to make money. It's their livelihood? I don't know. They're living in where? Beverly Hills, New York, San Francisco? Where are these people that are the agricultural in the valley that are drawing? Well, so I'm going to say from the latest documents on it, the last synopsis that you put out, they're drawing 50%, and you were even they were allowed a 2-week delay so they could plant their trees for the next plant, which in 25 years will be up quite a bit more than it is right now. I've used my time.
We used it wisely, and I'm very thankful for your comments, and we're going to have some answers for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just comment that I take offense at comparing Death Valley to Garlock.
Okay, let's keep this thing moving. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else for public comment on item number 6? Okay, we'll close the public hearing on item number 6 and bring it back to the board for comment consideration. Mr. Brown.
I'll keep it brief, which is unusual for me. This is for Ray. Where are you, Ray? Oh, hi, Ray. I know you're not going to like this, but business isn't evil and profit isn't evil. And the agriculture in the valley is following the law. Okay? And that's an important thing to remember. It's also an important thing to remember that everybody pays taxes, and those taxes pay wages, and those wages pay civil service wages, and it goes on and on. So they're benefiting the country. And there's a need for ag in this country. There's a lot of disagreement on how much and this and that, and that's why we're here. It's not lopsided by any means. I appreciate the lifting up of the word advisory on this committee. It is advisory. I represent you. Our fellow board members represent you as the water district. Our job is to represent the ratepayers. It's also to work in concert with everybody else in the valley. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So I'm not really worried about these numbers. I mean, voting members, non-voting members. I really don't know what voting and non-voting mean on an advisory committee, but that's what legal wanted, so whatever. They're all going to talk. And I think Bob Harrington said it very well. In the end, we vote. All the information comes to us, and we metabolize that information, and then we do what we're supposed to do. And in the end, that means that we head towards a water balance in our 20-year time frame or something. I don't see, and the ag has been incredibly willing and wanting to participate and pay to be a part of the equation, not pay for an advantage or anything else, but pay because they're part of the equation. So I just wanted to offer a little counterpoint. Business isn't bad, profit's not evil. And they're not acting in any way, shape, or form like a guy that's going to come in and strip mine the valley and then move away. They just don't demonstrate that. I think Meadowbrook's been here, I don't know how many decades, and they're from a 100-year-old plus dairy family, so they care about the environment, and so do we. So in short, you're represented by us, and you're represented by this board. And we do care. And there is nobody that's going to leverage or usurp whatever we come up with, because that's why this agency is being created, specifically, so that everybody works in concert and it's fair. And every meeting is open, and every meeting is Brown Act. So there will be no funny, weird stuff. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Mr. Brown. Next up, Mr. Kingsley.
Well, someone mentioned that domestic well owners were only represented by MIC, and I'll take offense at that also. I feel like Inyo County has domestic well users, and also it's kind of impossible to only represent the domestic well owners in Inyo County. If I'm representing domestic well owners, I'm representing all of them. I also think that everybody on this board recognizes what their duty is, and it's not just to their constituency, it's to the groundwater basin. That's really what our goal is. So also someone said that just this board could remove a PAC member. Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't take it lightly if somebody came and recommended that we remove somebody off the PAC. So it seems I don't really think it's just this board. I think it's this board who would put people on the PAC, and this board who would consider if they weren't participating, or if there was some reason that they needed to be removed. But I don't really anticipate that, other than just non-participation. That would be the reason I would see that we would be considering that. But I guess the term "just this board" doesn't seem appropriate. I think this board is serious and would only consider those when it was important. Also, speaking freely at the PAC, I think the idea that the PAC can't remove its own board members would facilitate people speaking freely at the PAC. Everybody should be able to participate, and they can't remove you, so you should be able to speak freely. That's really all I picked up on this, but I will say that clearly this board is moving towards getting these bylaws figured out, just from the number and the quality of the comments, and I'm impressed how much progress the board's made, even without me here.
Thank you, Mr. Kingsley. I'll pass on that one. Mr. Page.
Yeah. First, Chairman, I'd like to thank staff for putting into words some of my recommendations or suggestions from the workshop. I appreciate it, and I'm supportive of the language as they've drafted it. What I wanted to say to the members of the audience is the way I look at these two committees is that they're advising this board. So when people say that certain parties have representation on this board in the process, they do. But as a board member, I'm looking for these committees to advise us. And I want that advice to be from all beneficial users of the water in the basin. And I want, to borrow what one of the speakers said, I want that advice to come from a fair, balanced, and equitable body. I don't want anyone interest to have a majority say on these advisory committees. I want them to be balanced. And I suggested at the last meeting, based on public comment, that we add 2 seats for residential customers of a public water agency, because I saw that was one major beneficial water user in this basin that wasn't directly represented. Yes, the water district will have a non-voting seat on the PAC, but I believe that though their customers and maybe customers of other public water agencies should have a direct input in the advice that's provided to this board, not have to go to a meeting of the City Council, a meeting of the Water District Board to voice their opinions. I would like those folks to have a say. And that is why I suggested adding that, because I want the advice to come from these committees to come from a balanced group. And so I'm comfortable with the number of seats that we have now with this latest recommendation that adds to public agency water supplier customers. There were a couple of kind of tweaks that were mentioned that I'll throw back to staff in terms of what their thoughts are. I think there was some merit to a couple of the tweaks, but not all of them. But right now, I like this language as a starting point, and I'll let discussion go from there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Ms. Breeden.
Thank you. I would like to respond to Mr. Kelso. Ray, you and I have been friends a long time, and you 3 times. Are you sitting out there? There you are. I've heard you say what?
He hasn't moved.
He hasn't moved. Okay. Who represents me? We all do. To see that, to even think for one moment that my representation is only regarding those people who live inside the city of Ridgecrest, and Mr. Kingsley referred to that too. We all have. There is no delineation between where your concerns lie and where they don't. If we aren't here for everybody in the valley, we're here for nobody. And I think it's important that we recognize that is our job, not just to represent the people only from the water district. Peter referred to that. And not only the people in the county. If we can't look at our job as being inclusive and being able to make decisions based on not only my needs for the city that I perceive and my council perceives, but the needs for everybody in the community, even to the farmers, even to the domestic well owners, even to those of co-ops. I think when Mr. Decker referred to me asking for a co-op representative, I think that was taken up and brought up more efficiently with what Mr. Page had said. Whether you call them a member of a co-op, a member of a water user, one of the changes that you had asked for was to say that you must be, I think, Derek, you brought that one up, that you must be a resident of the valley of the agency. I think in that case, those people who are represented by Inyo County and San Bernardino County are not taken fully into the project, the process, the purpose, because you may not be part of the actual Indian Wells Valley groundwater basin. Some of the people in Trona are recipients of the water from the groundwater basin. I don't want to limit where you can live. I think where you offer your services, how you provide. And so I don't want to dismiss those people from Inyo County and San Bernardino County who are going to give us help, who will give us, hopefully, dollars, will give us opportunities to grow and make this better and more full for everybody. The other part of it I would like to respond lastly is that we have spent, and I've said it over and over again, 33 hours so far discussing this. We have not limited anybody, any time for the most part. We did say you couldn't speak for 30 minutes, but we did say that you could speak as you needed to, and especially when you had the opportunity to make your comments. I think there are changes that must be made. I've heard some of our constituents in the city say this document has to be perfect. Well, it isn't going to be. It never will be perfect. It will be the best we possibly can come up with. And as Chairman has and also put in the document that will be reviewed yearly, but as the Chairman has also asked that it be reviewed again in 6 months, we will be able to change those things that need to be changed, add those things that needed to be added, and delete those things that offer no purpose. I think we need to go ahead with it, make the changes as we see appropriate in the time frame, but I want to get started. I don't want to lose the opportunity for grant money that is available. Nobody is going to thank us because we said, but this has to be here. We can't go any further unless this is here. No one's going to say thank you for allowing that grant money to escape from the residents of this valley and this basin. I think we need to do our job, listen, learn, and lead. And this is our job now, to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I'll throw in my 2 cents. I like the changes about ensuring that the water resource manager attend those meetings. So I like that language in there. I think that's a critical component of what we're all talking about, the relationship between the water resource manager and the TAC, making sure that they're both working together. I don't doubt for 1 second that the way we have this set up, that members of the TAC are going to be making intelligent observations and contributions to developing the agenda items. There's no doubt in my mind, as a matter of human dynamics, that's going to occur. I don't think we have to spell that out. It's going to happen. Ms. Westerlusk, we talked about attendance records. I agree with that. I think that I'm going to personally make sure that I have an understanding of all attendance at all those meetings, so I'll know who was there and who wasn't there, more importantly, who wasn't there, so I get a balanced perspective on the comments that are made and the recommendations and the advice that's delivered. I'm also going to ask the PAC chairman to make sure that I see the dissenting perspectives. I want to see what everybody says. I want to see what the consensus is. I also want to see what the non-consensus is. I want to understand everybody's perspective as they make that contribution. I think that's going to be, you'll be seeing that as a matter of good governance that we will be delivering as best we can. As far as the quorum goes, I like the way that it's set up now. I don't like a too large a quorum because I believe that that can be gamed. There's more gamemanship that can occur as a result of having a greater quorum, reliance on a greater number than a smaller number. And I also believe that moving information at a speed, at some type of speed, is going to be a quality that we're always going to be struggling for. So I hesitate to put too much of an encumbrance on moving information. I think, Mr. Kelso, you have a very valid argument. I think we have responded to your very, very valid argument by doing the best we can to create an opportunity for your voice to be heard on the PAC, which is, I think, what you're, in essence, what you're saying. I think by the additions of 2 representatives from residential customers of public water agency supplier, I think that delivers the mail. And if that needs to be reviewed in 6 months and that word's not getting through, as if with any of this stuff, then we're going to make changes as we go along. Mr. Hoffman talked about regular relies. I don't buy that about the regular relies on the basin. I think it's everybody. Input from the TAC. He made a good comment about that, I thought, which was making sure we have a solid relationship between the water resource manager and the TAC. I'm all with that. Finally, I think the last gentleman spoke. I didn't catch your last name, sir. You with the glasses and the striped shirt, Mr. Mattis? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mattis. I thought you brought the most important point home for everybody, and that is this issue of fairness. Is what I'm hearing you question and have issues with. Are the ag people or the business interests? Whether you're a car washer or you're a hair dryer. How are you going to, hairdresser, how are you going to contribute to the person at home, the resident taking a shower, and, mom pouring water in the oatmeal to get things going? That's going to be a key ingredient of our GSP. Has to be across the board, and I've been assured by my chain of command up to Department of Water Resources that they're going to be looking at how have you approached the problem? Have you fairly described the problem? Have you fairly undertaking measures to fix the problem? And fairness is going to be a key factor in how we move forward. So I can only assure you that fairness will be pivotal on my mind, and I'm sure it's going to be on everybody's mind. And that means everybody is going to contribute fairly to the solution that we're going to need to develop across the board. I don't care if you're a business for profit or you're a family getting ready for school. You're going to contribute fairly to solve our problem. I think that's the best I can do. And this body will deliver that, and then I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen after those decisions are made, but they will be made. Kern County Groundwater Authority, measurement taking, someone brought that up. Wes, maybe that was you. I hear what you're saying. I talk with members of the Groundwater Authority, and they hesitate to get overly involved and extended in our processes, but as we move forward, those measurements are going to be a critical component of our data gathering, and so we're going to have a robust way of collecting that data. I know that Kern County right now is in the throes of a deliberation about changing ordinances in Kern County, and one of the ordinance I'm talking about is how are we going to collect data? We need to know how much water everybody's using. And you can't do a budget without understanding, what's coming in and what's going out. And so we're discussing now an ordinance change to include a beginning to develop that understanding, that proper data. And we're going to start by putting meters on all new wells. So that is in discussion now. And that will be coming up in the next month. So that's all I've got. I wanted to make sure that the the water resource manager attend. I think we need to change that language. I'm satisfied with the numbers. I'm satisfied also that we're going to review this within 6 months to see if it is the way we think it is. I'm satisfied that we answered Mr. Kelso. I'm satisfied that we answered Ms. Westlosk. Ms. Decker, Mr. Hoffman. So I'm satisfied across the board that we've got everything we need except for those minor changes, and I'm open up for your thoughts. Yes, sir.
I think the other just minor typo that we probably should add to the amendment is changing suppliers to supplier, because it says A, but that was a pretty basic one to fix.
Yeah. Okay, so if that's it, I'm looking for a motion to address those issues. And does someone want to capture those issues?
I do. I'd like to read them in. And to Ms. Westlock's comment, if you look at 5.2, the bottom paragraph, where it talks about the way the minutes will look, all of the issues that were addressed here, attendance, the minutes themselves of the meeting, and the voting, they are already recorded. They're in here. We already had that. So that's there. So with that, then it looks like the changes are going to be, we're going to drop an S on suppliers in 5.2.
5.7.
5.7. 5.7, number 2 on there, representatives, residential customers, it's going to be public water supplier, not suppliers. We have an of that will be dropped on in 5.9 at the end, so it'll be just support its determination. And then we will be adding, set the agenda of each TAC meet, attend and set the agenda of each TAC meeting will be added in 5.13. And with that, these are Article 5.
Mr. Chairman, I will move that recommendation with those, for Article 5 with those minor changes.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Mayor.
I just have one question. When we talked about the meetings of the PAC and the TAC, and the question was, is there going to be a schedule? Do we assume that they are going to, okay, I know you said you don't want to assume, but can we assume that there's going to be a reasonable schedule, at least over time, whether it be, I don't want to tell them you must meet on this day and you must meet 5 times a year or 50 times a year, but as needed, as the committee see. Is that part of that in there? Because I heard Mr. Ratora refer to that, and I agree there has to be some way.
The thought process on that is A, your board is going to essentially set the agenda for them and tell them when to meet. We didn't put a regular meeting date in there because we didn't want to second guess how many meetings we really need to have for a TAC or a PAC in what really amounts to 24 months. I mean, you got it's 30 months until you have to have your GSP adopted. If you give yourself a 6-month float, you're at 24 months. So is 24 meetings enough? Do you need 48? Does 36?
Okay.
It was a variable that we didn't know.
You've answered it. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's good. We have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Before we go to the vote,
I'll just comment that my concern about the quorum has been satisfied, but I do think that at some point the PAC will. It sounds like they would have the opportunity to look at that and decide if they thought they needed to do that a different way. And I'm in support of the changes as presented.
we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All be opposed. Okay, let's move on. It passes. Appoint individual. The next item is item number 7, appoint individuals to the Policy Advisory Committee. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As I've mentioned at last couple of meetings, I think, these appointments to the board, or to the PAC, not to the board, but to the PAC and the TAC. We're talking about the PAC right now, the Policy Advisory Committee, are going to happen in phases. We had a first phase, which was to identify individuals with some of the major ag pumpers. This is the second phase, which is to identify persons that are in a category that is either that is sort of named by organization, and so we're asking that you approve these individuals along with that go into the certain categories, and I'll go through those because they have there's some uniqueness to them. We have the first two the first one is Mr. Steve Goddard for representing Searles Valley Minerals. That's the category of wholesaler and industrial user. We had just been waiting for an application for Mr. Goddard. He had some questions about the role, and so that's been resolved. We recommend that be done. Donna Thomas representing East Kern County RCD. That entity is stated in the bylaws, so they just needed to identify the person. And we've known for some time that Ms. Thomas would do that. And so those are two sort of categories that get an appointment. The next three, the Navy, the Water District, and the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, are non-voting members on the PAC. So all we needed to get was the names of the persons those entities wanted. Brian Longbottom would represent the Navy, Don Zadiba representing the Water District, and Ryan Clouch representing BLM. The last category is business interests, and we had only received one application from the Ridgecrest Association of Realtors. They've identified Carol Wilson. That was somewhat unique because we hadn't received any other applications from that category. So we felt, and we had heard some comment from the board that we were in hearing those comments. We were confident that this was a good recommendation, having the Real Estate Association there. So those are the ones we'd ask you to approve. The third step would be to identify the remaining slots that are still open. And so anyway, so your first order of business is, if you're agreeable, is to approve these names of these individuals. And then the second would be to appoint a committee to go through the remaining individuals. Staff did not feel comfortable making that call, given there were a number of individuals, especially in the domestic water users category. So we suggest you form a committee to make those recommendations to the full board. Also, as part of the staff report, you see that we have recommended a deadline of June 8th. That's the week before our next meeting in June, to submit any applications to be on any committee in the PAC. We ask for your approval on that as well. So we'd be happy to entertain any questions if you have any. We're asking you first to approve the names of these 6 individuals to the PAC.
Thank you very much. Let's see what the public has to say about this. Anyone in the public wishing to make comment on item number, I think this is 7, appointments to the PACs.
Dale Haletic again, domestic well owner. I just wanted to ask the board, why weren't, I understand several applications were put in for domestic well owners, but why weren't they selected? This, and then to extend the due date till June the 8th was really surprising. I know you got more than 1 or 2 applications. I was one of them. So why weren't they selected? I guess I lost.
Thank you, Dale. We'll get an answer to you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. We'll close the public hearing, and this is going to be easy. How about you give...
we felt it was appropriate on the due date. We felt it was appropriate to have a deadline. We'd been asked by others in the public about a deadline, and at the workshop, I don't think there was a comfort level with a deadline at that meeting. So staff felt that we needed to put some finality to that. With regard to the domestic well owners, staff, as we started looking at the applications, we just did not feel comfortable. We could have made that recommendation, but not feeling comfortable and not knowing all the individuals, we felt that the board would be better directing us or making that decision today in public. So you could do that today. We suggest a committee might be a more delicate, thoughtful way of doing it. So you really have a couple of choices. You can make that decision today. I've got a list of individuals that have applied thus far. You would be leaving out persons that hadn't applied, but that's your choice. So in no way was it intended to slight those individuals. We knew this would be an ongoing process.
Thanks, sir. Okay, public hearing is closed. Let's have a conversation. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask, if we choose any or all of these people who, let's see, there's 9 of them who have applied, does that mean we may not in the future add some of those others who applied to the time frame? Because the comment I heard at our hearing was, our public hearing was that there was no deadline. And I wanted to be able to have a deadline so people knew. But I don't want to disrespect those people who were quick enough to come in and make that application, those 9 people that did. I think we've got some excellent people who've applied. I'm not opposed to approving today, but I don't want to limit that we can't appoint others in the future. So that's what I'm asking the procedure here.
Well, my answer to that question would be, do we have a finite number for each category, and we appoint those numbers and fill that quota, and then once that quota is filled, it's closed. Now, whether we substitute at a later time, that's up to the PAC, and it's up to this board. Ms. Kingsley.
It would seem odd to me to appoint members in certain categories where we're still recruiting for those categories. I understand the business one because there still is one more, and I guess we've only received one, and maybe there's consensus on that. But I guess I wasn't here when you were talking about whether there was a deadline or not. But if we're still saying it's open and we're filling names in, then really it's closed. I mean. So either it's open and we're going to fill from that the number of people that apply, or it's closed and we're using the people that have applied. And I guess I don't feel quite comfortable with filling slots if we're still recruiting for people to come.
Thank you, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Page.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Kingsley that for the positions where we've identified that we will accept recommendations from a specific organization because they're named as having a seat, I'm comfortable with filling those appointments today. But for those that we're accepting applications, I would agree that we would. I don't feel comfortable making appointments today to any of those positions if we still have a deadline that we're going to establish today of June 8th. I made the point at the workshop that until we really had finalized Article 5 and approved it, which we just did in the last item, it would be hard for me to set a deadline. We now have adopted an Article 5. People know what categories we're looking for, what kind of representation we're looking for from the community to advise us. And so now I am comfortable setting, and I think June 8th is a good date to set. I in no way intend to discount anybody that has already gotten theirs in. That to me indicates somebody who's very committed and interested, and I will consider that when we're looking at all the applications. But I understand we do have 2 seats that we're hoping to fill for business, and we've only got 1, so maybe we could appoint them. But I still would like to give other businesses time until June 8th to apply before we even fill that seat. So because that's not a specific entity that we've identified. So right now I'm comfortable appointing the names up to BLM, but not the business today, and would move that we appoint the Searles Valley Minerals representative, the East Kern County RCD representative, the Navy, the Water District, and BLM representative today, and that we set the deadline as staff recommends as June 8th, and then at the next meeting we can consider those appointments.
And I would second that. If was that a motion?
Yeah, that was my motion.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, let me give you, before we take the vote, let me give you my thoughts. Mr. Brown and I were assigned as a committee to go outreach to the major water pumpers, to open communication lines, and to begin a conversation. So we did that. During one of those meetings, I met with one of the gentlemen that we talked with. Had an opinion that he was hesitating applying for a position on any of these committees because he didn't understand it, because Article 5 had not been drafted properly, had not been structured, and so for whatever reason that gentleman decided that he was hesitant in applying. I took that and I said, I disagree with you. I think you need to get there. It's a whiteboard. We had that conversation, but I think the public also took that away, may have taken that away, that perception away that Article 5 has not been drafted yet. It has not been drafted, but it's not been approved. So I'm going to hold off applying until I get an approved Article 5. So I agree with Mr. Page, what he said about waiting until we fill the billets. I want to say this before we vote. I can't tell you how happy I was when I saw the names. Honestly, my spirits rose when I saw the quality of the names of people who want to play a role and want to contribute to what we're doing. So I'm not in any way casting any aspersions on anybody who's applying, who has applied in the past. I'm thankful you have. I think you're building confidence in me and our ability to succeed because we have some serious talent that is going to play a role in this policy advisory board. So we have a motion from Mr. Page, and that motion is to appoint everybody listed except for the business interest at the present time. Wait until June 8th. Is that motion also have a committee assigned to vet those names and make a recommendation to this board?
At this point, it doesn't because we haven't discussed that. But if I can add that, if that's the desire of the board.
Well, what do you guys want to do? You want to have that conversation and then make the motion, or you want to make a motion? Okay, so the motion is, if we're going to pass the motion, it is to nominate make those guys, everybody up to the Ridgecrest Association of Realtors, put them on the board. Is that the motion, Mr. Page?
Yes, the motion was to appoint Steve Goddard, Donna Thomas, Brian Longbottom, Don DeZiba, and Ryan Klausch to the PAC, and to establish the deadline as June 8th. And at that point, then, once we have all the applications, we can consider the other seats.
Thank you. We have that motion. We have a second on that motion.
And I'd like to second that, but I also do think we should have a discussion about the committee.
I agree 100%. So let's have the motion on the first part, and then we'll follow that up with a motion on. Is that appropriate, Mr. Counsel?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's do that then. Let's have a motion on Mr. Page's, a vote on Mr. Page's motion, and then we'll move on. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it moves on to the second half of that one, which is to form a committee to determine the other memberships. What do you people think?
I have how the committee operates. Are you going to make, whoever the committee is, they will get all the names and investigate it and then come back to this board with a recommendation? Is that what you're thinking? How, I'm almost having the same concern. I don't want to have 50 people up here and us trying to evaluate 50 people as a whole group. But equally, I don't want to see anybody, I don't think anybody, take it back. I got it. Go to committee. I take it back.
Let me see if I can say, I share your...
I have a concern. I want everybody to have a say.
We have 10 quality people. We can only take 8. And the people, all 10 are going to be, arguing their perspectives, and they're all going to be quality perspectives, and we got to pick 8. And 2 are going to not get picked. And that's life in a fast lane. That's our job.
I would just like to have all of us to be able to have some input. When you come back with 8, I would like to know why the other 2 were not included.
So,
I guess is what I'm asking.
So how about that? How about this? We have a committee, June 8th. They meet, applications. We form a committee. They meet. Then before we get together, they file their report, make their decisions, and submit their recommendations, what they're going to recommend to us prior to when we meet. So we all have a time to digest those recommendations before we come to the board. Ms. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a thought. You may want to, if you're going to, we're pretty aggressive with the June 8th deadline because you're not going to have much time. If you're going to consider every application and the deadline is June 8th, that means you have a day before our agenda deadline to submit our agenda to do that. So it's not going to. So maybe you want to push the date back a little bit to June 1st. Or a few days at least, so you can get those applications and have time to consider and then develop a recommendation. So I think you're just going to squeeze yourself into a corner.
Got it. Anybody have problems with that, Mr. Page?
Well, before I give an opinion on the suggestion to move the deadline to June 1st, if staff could elaborate for us in terms of at what point they think the committee could actually start doing work. I know there's going to be cooperation with the Water Resources Manager, who we haven't hired yet. And so while we would like to get all the appointments done at the June meeting, is that really what the deadline we need? Because we still have to hire the water resource manager and what other things. And I know we're also dealing with the other bigger deadline of having to have the GSP done by a certain time. So I don't want to hold anything up, but I would like there was some discussion in here about whether the people who've been appointed could start working, and I wasn't comfortable with that. But what would the committee, when will they be able to start doing some work? Is that dependent on the water resource manager being on contract?
My opinion is, Mr. Through the chair, yes, I think that would be appropriate.
So what's the timeline on hiring the water resource manager right now?
You're going to get something at the next meeting. Whether that'll be a final decision, I don't know, but you will get something. I'm going to, as I hear myself say it, I'm going to back off a little. I don't think it would be harmful for the PAC to meet and to talk about just, housekeeping items, how often, when they'd like to meet, get to know each other. Any substantive discussions, I think, would need to wait for the water resource manager. But I don't think there's a need to wait. The individuals that you're looking at, I think, are all going to be good, and they can self-govern.
My thought is I don't agree with that a lot. I agree with some of it, but not all of it. I don't think that hiring a PAC and getting them going is contingent on having a water resource manager. I don't believe we need to wait. I believe there are tasks that can be performed by the PAC in absence of a water resource manager. For example, public outreach, getting a better understanding of the finances, getting our POA&M into shape. There's a lot of things we can do, and in parallel effort, move towards getting to the water resource manager. I see all these smiles down there when people tell me I'm
just as a thought, in other analogous situations, there's been an effort to have the advisory committee weigh in on the selection of the engineer or the water resources manager. So it could go the other way. In other words, you might want to have them impaneled so that you can get a recommendation back from those when they review the candidate.
So you agree with me?
He did.
Maybe.
Wow. Ms. Christensen.
Just so you know, sort of a side comment on Mr. Page's comments. You have, with the sort of putting the Association of Realtors business application back in the pot, so to speak, you have 11 applications. You could start evaluating those now. Doesn't mean you have to make any decisions, but whatever committee you deem appropriate, you could start work on that now. For instance, there are three small ag applications. Are you going to get any more? Who knows? But you can start working.
Mr. Kingsley.
On the question of whether there should be a committee, not being from really here, I'd be appreciative of there being a committee to do some screening. And can we move the date from the 8th forward? I mean, could it be sooner? I mean, is that I don't know where that's set. Is that
sure? I mean,
that's just here. We're just talking about. I mean, that's just open right now.
Yeah, my thought is if the application can take 10 minutes to fill out, and most of the people that are engaged know that there's applications being submitted. So you'd have to be not paying attention to say you didn't know.
Yeah, so it seems to me like it would be fine to move the application deadline forward some, because people are applying already, and that could get the committee some more time to work on it. And we have applications; people have their name in.
So yes, Mr. Page.
Yeah, if I get one more clarification from staff. The staff report on this item says that an ad was placed that let people know that the deadline was June 8th. Is that correct?
It has not been placed. I anticipated that, and then I had second thoughts because I'm sometimes clairvoyant.
So I just want to make sure that we weren't going to move the date up to the 1st. We'd already put in the newspaper it was going to be the 8th. So thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Mr. Page. So I think we need a deadline for the application process to end. I think we need a deadline for the recommendation from this committee to the board. And then I think we need 2 dates there, and then we need to discuss the composition of the committee. And once we get those three things done, I think we can make a motion on this.
So, as a point of order, Council, do we need to first have a motion to reconsider the approval of the last one and then do a new one? Or can we, as a separate motion, just change the deadline date, which was part of the last thing we approved?
We can have a separate motion for just the deadline date if you'd like.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So do you want to get through all those things you just mentioned before we come up with a motion, or do you want to?
Yes, I would like a date for the deadline.
And I'm comfortable with June 1st. That's fine.
And then I'd like a date for when the recommendation gets forwarded to the board. And then I would like to have a conversation about who's on this board. I'll throw a couple dates. June 1st is a good time for me for the applications to be finalized and submitted. I think June 5th is ample time 5 days is ample time for a committee to review these boards, these applications. And I think 2 of the 3 center folks need to be on that committee, meaning either one of the 2 of the 3 of us, and at least one of us, probably 2, and then some other persons.
I'm supportive of everything you just said.
Did you make a motion?
I can't.
You can't.
Oh, well, you really could.
So if I was to restate what the chairman just proposed, I would move then that we now set the deadline for applications as June 1st, that we establish a committee. Well, I guess I can't make a motion because no one has said they're willing to, of the 3 has indicated they're willing to be on it. Okay, so I will move then that the deadline for applications is June 1st, that we establish a committee to review those applications. Once they're received, that committee membership would be Mayor Breeden and Supervisor Gleason, and for them to complete their review. And I know Chairman, you said June 5th, but I'll give you enough time to actually get your review completed and written up in time for the agenda to get out for the June 15th meeting so that the board can consider your recommendations at the June 15th regular meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's move on. That brings us to item number 8, report on POA&M for groundwater sustainability plan. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Groundwater Authority, you have a spreadsheet before you that is our plan of milestones for tasks associated with really all the activities, but the end goal being the adoption of a groundwater sustainability plan. I'm tongue-tied today. Or GSP. And so I just wanted to go through and look at the things that we have done as you go, and per the chair's suggestion, we'll probably modify this a little bit so we show a little more clearly what we've accomplished as we go forward in the next meeting. But again, going from the top, GSA has been approved. We have adopted bylaws. Our deadline was to do that in February. It's now May. We have, although we understand now that the bylaws will be added to, but at least I think the core, the skeletal structure of the bylaws have been adopted. Adopt PAC and TAC charter. That's really been absorbed into the bylaws now. So that is complete as far as the PAC and the TAC are concerned. Appoint PAC and TAC members. That was deadline was April. You're now in May. You're a little behind, but you're 2/3 of the way there. And then committee scheduling. That one, the members of the committee, if I understood the direction of the chair, and without any opposition, it sounds like the committee, the PAC, can start meeting. And so they could start scheduling their meetings. So that could happen too. Revenue generation process is the one that is sort of looming out there that we have not gotten serious yet about. and just because of other priorities, we have not. But that's the next thing. And then you've got water resources manager RFQ that went out. Responses received were on schedule for that, and review and select negotiated contract that is coming. We're right on schedule with that, May, June, and completion in July. So we're doing pretty well. I'm welcome to get your input or your suggestions or corrections, but I just wanted to make sure we're sort of on task, and that's my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Page?
Yeah, just one quick clarification in terms of what I thought we just discussed under the last item was I heard the chairman suggest that we didn't need to wait for the hiring of the water resources manager for the PAC to beginning to meet. I didn't necessarily hear him say that the PAC could start meeting before we had made the other appointments.
Right, until it's complete. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Okay, let's open this up for the public and your thoughts on what we're talking about here. Come on up.
Stan Rotora. Heard a lot of discussion just a few minutes ago about the PAC involvement in the selection of the water resources manager. I think that's a good idea. They're going to have to be working together, so they need to have somebody that's compatible. However, I think, quite frankly, it's more important that the TAC have an input into the selection of the water resources manager. I worked for the Navy for 36 years. Never once did the Navy, in any program or project that I worked on, select a contractor without a technical review of the proposals. I think it is critical that the TAC chime in and do a in-depth look and evaluation of the various people that are submitting proposals. I think that is critical, and I would encourage you to get not only the PAC up and running as soon as possible, but the TAC up and running as soon as possible, and have a significant input into the selection process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Judy Decker. Did I hear you correctly that you are recommending that the PAC not meet until all the seats are filled?
Yes, some variant like this. Yes, some variant just
okay.
like that.
And then my other question is, are you going to develop a set of criteria for evaluating the applicants? How are you going to pick your choices?
I'm available for lunch, and if they buy, I'll pick them.
All right.
I hear you. Thank you, Ms. Decker. That's going to be a criteria that the mayor and I are going to sit down and ponder and go over and make phone calls and thoroughly review each applicant.
And I agree with what Mr. Stan said prior to my comment, that you need the TAC involved.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Renee West-Delusk. I live within Ridgecrest city limits. I have a question regarding the graph here. Revenue generation process, what does that entail? Is that really going on right now?
Thank you. Was that your only question?
And then the Prop 1 grant application.
Thank you very much.
Is anything going?
We'll get you answers to those. But before we get answers to you, maybe I can help her with the question. I'm not satisfied with this POA&M. I think it is a wonderful stab at a first draft POA&M and looking at a general article, a review on where we are and where we need to go. But we've been looking at this thing, and this now seems to be becoming like a document of record, and I'm not satisfied that this is a satisfactory document of record. We need a lot more work done on developing a plan of action and milestones that's going to get us to a GSP in 2 years. And it's going to be able to complement the TAC and to complement the work done by the PAC and the Water Resource Manager. So I would like a complete overhaul of this POA&M in terms of not necessarily, I'm not saying anything's wrong in it. I'm just saying it's not giving me any real information that I can make decisions on. So I don't know, Renee, if that falls into what you're saying. I mean, I got a million questions on it, and I'm not thinking that I see things satisfactorily in this. Anyone wishing to make comments on that?
The only comment I have is that our timeline really needs to be shifted for the entire milestones in the plan, because we're not even going to start most of these until July, based on how we're functioning right now. So if you push the entire thing over, the bottom changes a bit. So we definitely have to look at the time frames, when we'll really have committees up and running, when we're really going to have this coordinator or water resource manager. So the whole thing, the whole time frames are off by 2 to 3 months.
Commander.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
No.
No.
Test. I guess I'm not working, so I'll speak up. But yeah, I think the next step, and I'm willing to, while I can't have an active role in establishing dates and milestones, I am willing to help with formulating the format that Alan and I spoke of. I think what we need to do is establish dependencies here. So one task is dependent upon another task, to what Peter was alluding to. And so when you have a task in the front end that starts to fall, it has a ripple effect, or it doesn't have a ripple effect. And it'll help us better understand the tasks that we need to be focused on and when they no kidding have to be done. And if for whatever reason we're missing one of those, what do we then need to do with the subsequent tasks to shorten their timeline so we can still hit our milestone? So I'll be willing to work with Alan on the format for that.
Outstanding. What else do you need, Mr. Christensen, in terms of support to get this to where we want it to be?
I think we have a staff, a group that's kind of pitching in, and we're doing some of this, what we're doing right here internally. We have our own task list based on what you tell us, direct us to do. So I think we can accomplish what you're wanting. I think we have a better vision of it. So great.
Thank you, sir. I think this is going to be a work of, it's going to be changing as we move along. I just like to see some emphasis on this, because this is the way it's written right now. It doesn't tell me much. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to get a motion on the report to receive and file on the plan of action milestones for a groundwater sustainability plan.
So moved.
We have a motion?
I'll second it.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Moves us to General Manager's report. Mr. Christensen.
Yes, just one major item. As I mentioned, we have received proposals from firms and individuals, or combinations of firms, teams of people that are qualified to serve as a water resources manager. We received 9 proposals. Staff is now identifying some dates that we can start evaluating those. Our plan is to find, we'll have to screen, down to a smaller group, and then have your board consider those. But we're identifying some screening and then some interviews. We will get some other outside technical experienced professionals that work in this kind of field to help us screen. It wouldn't be just us. And so we'll be bringing that back to you. Again, most of that screening will be done at a staff level. So I just wanted to alert you to that. The second thing I wanted to do was sort of alert or respond to one of the comments that was made, and I think it was a good comment. They were concerned that that somehow and I can't remember, I think it was the gentleman in the back, Mr. Mattis, it might have been him, that residential use or municipal use might be being pushed out by ag use as far as groundwater usage. And the good thing is that, from my perspective, this is an open environment where everybody gets to speak, and I think that's a good safeguard. The second safeguard is that the goal, this GSP has to be approved by the state of California. DWR, the Department of Water Resources, will look at this, and they will have to approve it for sufficiency. In other words, and I've never done one of these, so I'm talking conceptually, but from what we've been instructed, that it will have to get to sustainability. And so no one will be left out. The problem is big enough that it will. Maybe I'm safe enough to say that if you eliminated all the residential and including the military use of water in this valley, that wouldn't solve any problem. It wouldn't solve the problem. It couldn't get there. So it'll impact everyone. But I think this GSP is a good safeguard. I'm not saying that is the answer, that we're going to do that. I'm just saying, by way of example, it's a problem, but the GSP has to address it. It has to have a plan over time to address it, and that will be based on science, primarily science. All the numbers will have to add up. Everything will have to work before the state will approve it. So even as we go through this process, that product delivered to the state still has to be approved by them and acceptable to them, or we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, or we might be in trouble. Who knows? But we hope that's not the case. But I think it's a good safeguard. And I think it's important to remember that you have a safeguard here, these elected officials, but you also have a safeguard at the state, because they are going to require sustainability.
Thanks, sir. Closing comments. Mr. Page.
Yes, there were a couple of comments earlier today from the public thanking our facilitator, Dale, for the process, and the board for the workshop that we held last month. And I also wanted to thank Dale and the public for attending and providing their input. The one thing I did want to suggest, that if we do a workshop in the future, is that whoever we give the role of facilitating that, it would be good for this board to give them a specific goal in mind. I know, as having facilitated some things myself, is I need to know kind of what the outcome is intended to be. You know, what tangible result do you want from that? We kind of gave her a general goal for this, of we wanted to accept all input, and so she accomplished that. But that may not always be our goal, and so I think I just wanted to advise this board that if we do another workshop in the future, is that we make sure that we provide very specific direction on what we want to accomplish with that workshop.
Great thoughts. Thank you very much. Closing comments. Anyone else? Go ahead, Pete.
So you guys know I've been on this board a long time, and it's good to remember that it takes a lot of time for people that are retired or not retired to put all your time into this stuff. So I got to tell you, none of us agree on everything, but we agree on a lot, and I really appreciate the time that you guys put into this. I mean, if you think about it, there's 30,000 people and change, and here you guys are, the ones that are really concerned and want something meaningful to happen with our water supply. So I just want to say thank you for your comments and your time in the documents you write, in the consistency of attending all these meetings. So we know that that'll be important as we're forming this pact. And then, so thank you. The other thing is Adele, you did a good job. The room was flipping cold. It was like, 65 in there. Next time I'm going to wear a jacket and a hat, because bald people get cold faster. But if we do have it again, it would be nice if all that stuff. It's kind of weird that a conference room isn't ready to have a conference in it with audio, video. That's kind of unusual, but I'm sure we'll take care of all that. But so I just want to thank you for the job you did do. It was kind of a tough job, and I think you did a fine job. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I got a couple of real quick ones. First one, thank you, everybody. The talent that submitted their applications for the PAC thank you very much. Whoever you were, thank you very much. It's going to be a tough choice that the mayor and I have to go through. I want full steam ahead on this water resource manager selection. That is obviously one of the critical functions and critical nodes for our success. And remind everybody that we're the 25-month mark, 2 years and 1 month, and we've got to have a plan. So we need to move. Okay, and seeing no other closing comments, yes, Mr. Longbottom, Commander.
Borrow BLM's mic here. Sorry. So first off, the Article 5 and the bylaws, is it possible that we can get the final version posted? Just we've gone through a lot of iterations. There's a lot of, from a version control perspective, just to make sure everyone's in sync. The second thing, just in general, I mean, think about what we've accomplished over the last 30 to 60 days, and let's build on that momentum. I mean, we just, as a team, showed what we can do when we all work together and we communicate with each other. And 9/10 of winning something like this is maintaining that momentum. And so let's come out of this huge win and let's get some more wins. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. And the next meeting, I want this POA&M on the board so that the public can look at it and discuss as we move along. Okay, that brings us to item number 11, which we have a closed session discussion about a public employee appointment. The title of the board attorney, Government Code 549579B, paragraph 1. Thank you all.